How many people here have kids under the age of 12 in their house? How many people in this room know that most smoke alarms, a child under 12, 72% of them will not hear a smoke alarm go off? How many people did not know that? Raise your hand. So I bring this up, and you can Google it. Yes, TJ's right. ABC News. Happened after an incident in the UK where 6 kids died in their house. It was because their parents, believe it or not, set the house on fire. Every one of those kids under 12 was in a room with a working smoking alarm. And they found out that children's ears just don't have the right tonality to hear a smoke alarm. Something we don't discuss in the U.S., but I must, right? This is why we talk about suicide at construction, or some of the best practices we're picking up and sharing them at a conference like this. And the answer is, I'm glad you asked, Dan Lavoie, is you go get a kiddie fire alarm with a little recorder in it, and you put in there, hey, Tony, the house is on fire, meet me out behind the pool. And almost every time that child will wake up and leave. And I would encourage everyone here to Google the ABC News report on this. It shows the kid in bed, smoke alarm sounding, strobe lights screaming. It's amazing, and that kid's just sleeping away. So you learned a couple things from this conference. That's my coolest, I think. All right, so back to Corey.
Experienced that firsthand.
Have at it. Give us.
We had an alarm go off in our house, and me and my wife tried to figure out what it was, and it was screaming. Neither of our kids woke up, and it had to be going on for 4 or 5 minutes before we figured out what the issue was, and it was not a fire. But yeah, they did not stir. It's scary.
Cool. Well, we need to share stuff, right? So, all right, let's get started. We're going to even farther behind. Corey, you ready for this one? So I was at one of the Jacobs projects, small world stuff, right, in Durham, North Carolina, pharmaceutical plant for Merck. And I see this huge thing on the floor, which was like a bunch of pipes, and that came off of a railroad train, all stacked together, all insulated in a rack on the ground. It must have weighed 10,000, 20,000 pounds. I was like, man, somebody's in a prevention through design here. This is how it's supposed to be. You build the stuff on the ground and you put it up. But when I asked Corey, like, what are you doing here? A couple of days ago, he probably wasn't sure what prevention through design was, but they've been doing this for years at Southland, which I find extremely interesting. So if you could kind of maybe walk us through why you're doing what we're trying to do.
So, can you hear me?
Not well.
Go a little higher. How about that? Yeah, so, the most important thing is that when people show up to the job site, that they go home the same way. We think about how people are impacted on the job site, and we talk about financial, but the people who are really impacted are the families. That family won't have their father or their mother or their brother or sister, and they're impacted for the rest of their life. And so we look at that, and we look at, I made the joke of, happy elves make better toys. If we give these people the right tools and we allow them to go home safely, they're going to perform better. If they perform better, that's the payback to the job, to the owner, to the client, is you have a safe project, so you don't have the headaches of dealing with problems. You have happy employees that want to stay, so you have worker retention. I mean, you could just list a number of things that make this the right thing to do, and you can sleep at night because you know you've done the right thing, not because how it padded your wallet or your pocketbook. So we've been doing this a long time, and to be fair, until I came here, I didn't know what it stood for, and I came to the realization that this is just what we've been doing because it's the right thing. So I'm really happy to hear that it has a real term that we can promote in the industry, that we can push to other people, that there's more data than I even knew existed. And yeah, I mean, to me, doing the right thing is the most important. Some people need to be convinced through a financial means, and if you can do both, I think you win.
Excellent. And so I would encourage you, this is a great segue into previous workshops we've had. I was looking at last year's, I think. Can't remember the contractor that's doing duct work outside in the field, but now they do the duct work in the beautiful warm shed, and they just put the whole thing with concrete in the ground. And I think it was 61% cheaper, right? We don't spend a lot of time in the United States talking about the value in dollars. I don't know why we're reluctant. Few people really care about safety, but if you can find profit, schedule, reliability, quality, you get safety by default, right? So that's something I've really approached. And so Dan Lavoie hasn't had a chance really to get in front of you folks, but known him for too many years. We came up with Nothing Hits the Ground together, which was kind of just way cool. And when he first brought me into this building, you should have seen a smile on his face. And it's because of how he put this building together. So we're talking about influence, Dan. And you had challenges, but some huge rewards, including the entrance to the building, if you could go through that.
Yeah, so when Liberty, I'll start with my introduction to prevention through design, which was through a Harvard 3-day course. And afterward, I said, this is great, but all my accounts are general contractors. By the time they hear about the job, design's done 99% of the time. So I didn't think there was an opportunity. Then I heard grumblings that Liberty was going to be putting up this building, so I wedged my foot in the door of the Liberty project management team and said, hey, I've got this idea of prevention through design, can I try it? And reluctantly, they said, sure, just stay out of our way, don't cost us money, and have at it. So I got drawings of this section of the building and the tower next door, and just started going page to page and looking for opportunities. My focus was end user, because it was my first time really dealing with prevention through design, so didn't have too much opportunity for construction. Long story short, we had a lot of positive influences on this project. Everything from guardrails on the roof above us, which is a green roof, which initially had no fall protection, and I was able to influence the team. They always wanted me to make the decision. I said, I don't make decisions, I'll just tell you where I think we should go. You guys have to make the decisions because there's financial and other implications. But our corporate executives look down on this roof, and so we know it's going to be kept up. So I said to facilities, how often are we going to have to be out here? He said, probably every day. And so I said, we need guardrails. This was after a day of just talking about all sorts of opportunities, and they almost pushed back on me enough where I just gave up. I said, well, make a pretty guardrail, because they thought the sight lines were going to be an issue. Long story short, they ended up putting a hard roof for the first 5 or 6 feet, guardrail, so it's not as visible, and then we worked on some access points to get on the roof. So just an example of being able to influence. So after that, the project management team started coming to me with ideas and concerns. One of them are these sidewalk vaults. And there were 3 sidewalk vaults on the main, our new building, right in front of it. And they said, hey, for no money, we can do this. For $500,000, we can do this. For $1 million, we can do this. And I said to them, I'm not going to talk money, that's your deal, but here's what I say. We have a brand new corporate office. We're going to have thousands of people coming in every day. We want to reduce the risk as low as possible. And so we were able to eliminate 2 of the 3 sidewalk vaults. The one that remained, we were able to minimize the amount of steel and metal in the grading to reduce the slip exposure, and put a material on it that reduces the slip exposure. It's called slip knot. I'm not promoting that, but that was the product. And I think they ended up spending quite a bit of money to do all that. But the reason I bring that story up is because they brought that to me. We had worked together enough where they started to recognize the value of prevention through design. And there were several other things that they brought to my attention looking for my input. So yeah, we can have an influence. And then when we built our building in Plano, Texas, a couple years later, they came to me again and said, we want to do this prevention through design thing again. So.
Oh, thanks, Dan. And thanks again for hosting, man. This is a sweet place. And the food was great. There's no bar afterwards, but next year, thinking.
Next time.
So Donna, gosh, she was the head of the AIHA for years, past president. A lot of stuff got done from 2009 when Donna started with another group, Christine Branch and Matt Gillen, and it's not construction related. And if you can kind of go through some of those, for example, Georgie Popoff's work on laundry bags in hospitals. Do you remember that one? If not, I can help you. And garbage collectors, those, the guys that pick up the cans. So there's a lot of things that prevention through design has been accomplishing. It has nothing to do with people in this room, but it's more than just a construction thing, which is what I'm hoping Donna can expand on.
Right. So getting back to one of Georgie's big contributions that started when I was at NIOSH and we were working with Lee Spittle was what is the return on investment for designing in workplace health and safety? Because that's the conversation that health and safety professionals need to learn how to have. We don't like to have those conversations. We want to say, because it's the right thing to do. And we need to sit down and help understand what that return on investment is. He's created, working with NIOSH, that's now on the NIOSH website, and I think it's on the AIHA website, excuse me, you can download it from that, what that return on investment is. And it also, I've used it, it also factors in things like, for instance, if I control noise exposures, I don't have to have, down to below the OSHA action level. I don't need to have a hearing conservation program. That means I don't have to have annual training, I don't have to have annual sampling, I don't need to have annual audiometric testing for associates, and then pulling them out of work to do that. And that's not something we'd like to think about, but it's something that really I was able to put together and help defend why we need to do this. And so Georgie's contributions were really wonderful for that. But getting back to the trash cans, so remember when we were, well, some of us were younger, yeah, a lot of you are already young, but we normally would have had trash collectors taking your trash and heaving it into the back of the truck. For most places now, I think that that's probably not happening any longer. Your trash is put into a container, and then that container is lifted onto the truck, and then the workforce then is protected from not only the ergonomic hazards associated with it, but what is in your trash that they could be splashed with or hurt by. So that's another interesting factor. Yes.
Yeah, and I'll add the last one because I thought it was pretty cool. So in hospitals, they used to have these big green bags full of laundry that weighed, I think it was 87 pounds average, and with this one handle on the end, and they would throw this thing over their back like Santa Claus and get hurt every day. And Elise and Georgie watch these people work, which is something we don't talk about, right? There's a guy named Chris Golden. For those of you who take notes, write his name down. Chris worked for New York City, and he would watch. So they say they had to build a new sewage treatment plant. He would spend 2 weeks at the old plant listening to the guys bitch about, hey, can't get to this valve, blah, blah, blah. It didn't happen in the new plants because he listened to the people doing the work. So George and Elise watched these people work at this hospital, dragging these bags full of gross laundry, and interviewed them. Hey, what would work? Well, when Tony helps me, we can throw this bag down the chute. But there's no handle on the end of the bag. So really all they did was put another handle on both ends of the bags and reduce the load by half, and then the numbers were spectacular. We haven't talked about workman's compensation yet, right? But if someone's not getting hurt, if you eliminate the condition, you eliminate the incident. And that's kind of what they're famous for. And there was this thing called the Green Iguana Project where they tried to
I think so.
share these best practices, which are still available out there. So it's on Google, right? This is nothing new. And if you go to the older, from her 2009 conference, there are all those lectures and those presentations, including some on return investment back in 2010, are available on the website. A lot of this is not new. So I would encourage you to go back through these workshops and use the resources that thankfully NIOSH has provided us. Bob spoke on a presentation we did for OSHA. I think Scott Ernst put it together. And you had some great examples of stuff we don't see, right? And one of it was electrical switchgear for some reason up on this pad. You know what I'm talking about? And nobody recognized until Bob walked in the room. And if you could expand on some of those, the reasons why other people need to look at what you're doing.
Yeah, so what I would say is that I had mentioned that we do the hazard identification review, and we do that up front. We do that very early. I think that's been one of the most valuable tools. We just had a client which we kind of strong-armed into having that review because that particular industry that we were servicing doesn't usually do that. So we had the review, and we ended up catching some pretty big things. And like one of them was they put the offices right next to where they were handling their scrap. And that's very loud. And I don't think our engineers understood how loud that is, or our architects. And the client, though, said, wow, you can't do that. That's going to be really bad offices. So we were able to, and the design looked good, I mean, on paper, but in practice, it wasn't going to work real well. So we ended up moving those offices. Things like that are very big value added. And really and truthfully, that is no cost because we just moved them. They're just in a different location. So there's really no, and it's paper at this point, nothing's built. So what I would say is that it's the early. Like with the switchgear, it would have been nice if somebody would have looked at that and said, oh no, we can't do that, you know, when they were actually planning the design. But if you don't have the review meetings, that they're thinking not about functionality, but they're actually thinking about how safe this is, then it's not gonna happen, and it's gonna end up designed that way. So I would say that that's getting to it early and getting the process rolling early is the best, and the client gets right on board. Once they find one thing like that, so this same client now wants to have another review next week.
Cool. That's how you keep clients, right?
So, yep, and they were very apprehensive about it because they didn't know. So another thing that we do is that right before we do the review, we train. We train them. So we have training slides and we show them what to do. So I think that that's very important because they haven't been exposed to the process before. So you have to train them a little bit so that they can get involved and know the process and going in. So that works very well as well. Yeah. And then we log that training as to who's trained.
Scott, if I remember right, you recorded the session that Bob was speaking at. It's available from OSHA or CPWR?
Yeah, it's on CPW.
Like 2 months ago it was done, right? Yeah, I would encourage everybody to look at the examples that Bob had. Bob's presentation could go for an hour or two with what's going on in the field, and maybe someday he'll come back and we can do that for us. But
What I'd like to do is like we were talking about this cost savings, what I'd like to do is go back to construction. I'm going to do this. I'm going to go back to construction and say, okay, well, how much did you save? What was your return on investment? Because I think that could help, and that'd be a nice slide to add.
that'd be good, yeah.
To the
All they're listening for is what's in this for me, right, Dan? So, Dan, you've got a bunch of clients. You've got all this stuff in your head from PtD. Wisdom, right? Is there an opportunity for insurers? We had this conversation earlier. To get this to the folks that they're insuring. So, you move from risk management to risk elimination. That helps your money in your bank. It also eliminates hazards on the projects. How do you do that?
That's a big challenge.
Yeah.
So at Liberty, we developed a prevention through design toolkit, both internal facing and external. So the idea was, one, we need to expand our internal knowledge so we can consult to prevention through design, because an owner hearing those words isn't going to really get it. So our role is to educate our clientele and get them excited about this, so hopefully they can take it to the next step. So UPS, Disney are two of our accounts that have taken prevention through design, and they're running it, they're working it, and it's excellent to see how we can influence from that ground floor, really starting with our own consultants. So I did training with some UPS folks, and then they brought it to the bigger UPS account, and they've had a lot of positive influences. We also were able to do that with a local bank. It started out with simple, you can imagine bank branches, they have slip, trip, fall hazards everywhere. And so we started talking about prevention through design with their flooring. And then they came back to us a year or so later and said, hey, we've got this big new facility we want to build. We want to do more than just the floor. And again, through baby steps at the beginning, they saw the value in prevention through design as a concept. And we got almost 100 positive prevention through design concepts implemented into that project, which included construction safety. Bob Kuntz, who was supposed to be here from Dimeo, couldn't make it, but he's a big proponent of prevention through design, and he saw the value on his end, and we got all the players together. And one of the other interesting things was we got an architect who got it. It took 3 or 4 meetings, but once that individual understood the value, he did the same thing that we did at Liberty, is they started to come to us with, hey, I see this, what do you think? So they were coming to us with a problem and looking for solutions. They're not safety professionals. He's an architect. At Liberty, they're not safety professionals, they're project managers. But they can sometimes see the bigger picture and say, I know there's going to be a problem here, help us. And that's when the safety professionals and folks with PtD understanding can really make a bigger influence.
And so for those of you who get ENR magazine or have been following this group for a while, John Gambatt's probably one of the top 2 folks. He should get the award this year. And I met with a Merck company just north of here in Billerica about 5 years ago. And they wanted to hear about PtD, which is way cool, right? And they ended up putting in 122 design interventions, I'll call them, in that project, which is a pharmaceutical plant. On a project within the last 2 months, I was asked to go to, let me go back a step. We're looking at a huge school project, college, millions of dollars. And they asked for the typical sales team, and they asked for someone with experience in prevention through design. So if you don't think this is marketing too, this is business 101, everyone. When they ask for PtD people at the sales, you've really done something well with your company. And I'll say that for Gilbane. It was an easy thing to do. In fact, they asked me to come back, even if we didn't get the job, to do the PtD presentation for the college. So next one's for Corey. You ready, Corey? At some point, somebody said, hey, let's build all these pipes in the ground and put them up in the air. And you had to either convince the client or the engineer or the architect that we don't want people working on ladders. And so I'm curious in 2 things, 2-part question. Number 1, who drives modularization? When you pick up a mechanical firm, you guys are a dime a dozen, right? But not everybody does what you do. So is that a reason that they pick you, number 1? And number 2, what do the workers think?
Okay, so it's a lot to unpack there. So first thing first, when sometimes we operate as the engineer of record, sometimes we don't. When we're not the engineer of record, dollars, we have to go with dollars. So what we have to do is a cost analysis where we show the value. So at the front end of the job, we have to talk dollars. We can't be afraid to talk money because money grabs attention. In fact, we have some clients that want a certain amount of the project to be fabricated off-site. We have quite a few. That's part of the project requirements. So to hit the first point, it starts with really, a lot of times it really starts with the contractor, because the contractor is looking at schedule. You know, we have a schedule, so the modularization may allow us to hit the schedule more appropriately. The contractor is also looking at the labor force. So whether you guys know it or not, there's not infinite amount of labor. So when you only have a certain amount of labor, you have to do whatever you can to reduce the amount of on-site labor as well. So you have those factors. So yeah, we push the modular when it makes sense, because it's not one size fits all, by convincing through showing a schedule improvement, a cost savings, a safety, et cetera. Now, as far as, I think your other question was?
What do the workers think? They say thank you?
So the workers. So the impact to the workers can actually be a negative sometimes, depending on the workforce. And what I mean by that is if you're taking perceived amount of work from those workers, right? So you have to be aware of that too in your market, right? If the market is low and now you're doing this modular thing, you're actually taking work away from the guys who could be stick building it much slower, right? So you need to be aware of that dynamic. That's a real thing. The workers who get it and who are bought in, they really look at this as, wow, my back. I can save my back, I can save my legs, I can go home safe. And those are the workers who plan on being in the business long term. They have to look at, hey, I have to be installing pipe for the next 10 years or ductwork for the next 10 years. This makes a big deal to be able to do this safely and not hurt every night. Also, they don't have to get up on a scary lift to do something that they don't want to do in order to feel like they can keep their job. So you have a little bit of a balancing act with the workers. But in general, for the most part, I've only seen happiness at taking that approach. Nothing better than being, feeling safe when you do your job and your job not being as difficult as it could be. And once again, the labor shortage. We have lately not run into the issue where people feel like you're taking food off their table by mitigating the work done on site.
There's probably some training required on how to bring some of these philosophies to the workforce. We're not good at that, right? And I remember when Dan and I did Nothing Hits the Ground, the local labor union bought an airplane and they flew it around Turner's offices saying we were trying to break the union. It's ridiculous, but we're taking work away from them. What I found is with fewer workers, we could do more work in a day, right? With the workers that they do have, seems to be working. And just to catch up here, I'm going to throw this one to Donna, which goes way back to when we first met. 2009, very few people even thought this was a clever idea, right? Now people are expecting it. But in your organization, you have to make some huge battles to even get the conversations to the right people. And I'd be very curious as to how you put your argument together that you have these huge ventilation systems, for example, on Amazon that they may not need before they build it.
So everything at Amazon begins with a white paper, and the white paper has to document certain aspects of your proposal. It has to be research driven. There has to be the potential for pilot testing for your intervention. There has to be some financial analysis. And then you start to weave that up through the rank and file and then through the different pillars in our organization, the different silos, if you will. And then only then were you able to get it up and approved. And then during that process, there's extensive modifications, as there should be. I only know what I know. When I talk to other people, I know a lot more, and they can add information to it to make it much more powerful. Or they can say, you need to move on from this, or you need to really modify what your thoughts are. So that's how we get things done.
By the way, make sure you have your questions. We got about 4 minutes left here, so if you have questions, please write those down. So Bob and Corey, I see a commonality here already, right? You were reluctant to say how much you made doing PtD. He probably doesn't know what he makes. And this directed to you, Bob. If we start publishing, if we do work at height using modular mechanical systems, so you're going to save 30%, a client's not going to do something else. And when a client seems to ask for things, it's easier for the unions to accept. Client said we need drug testing, we're going to have to do that. Client requires, right now we're doing the build stadium at Gilbane. I think 30% of the materials have to be modular coming into the project. I can only see that growing. So in your company with Jacobs all over the world, 2 questions. Are those requirements already in place overseas? And do you see something like percent modular being enacted here in the U.S.?
Yeah, so overseas, it is indeed the way that the work is done in most cases. So in that particular case, there's no question as to how the strategy is going to go on a large building. But here in the United States, we're a little different. We're used to the stick built. It's a little bit of a paradigm shift to try to get everybody going a different way. So yeah, I was probably a little bit reluctant because it's probably a very considerable cost savings. And I think once clients see that, that's the way that they're going to want to go, because you're winning on safety, schedule, and cost. Right. So those are 3 really big hitters.
I think that's a good answer, but now I'm going to throw this to any of you. What's the best way to share that opportunity in the U.S.? Anybody want to take that on? To share that it makes business sense. Dan, you're smiling? Give it a try.
Because I don't want to touch this.
Yeah, I know. That's why we're on the stage, guys.
Yeah, I get a lot of questions about if we do this, can we save in insurance? And quite often, it's not a direct correlation. So we can't say, if you do this, yes, we'll reduce your premiums by X%. What I say with prevention through design is, if you're reducing risk, you're probably going to reduce injuries, and injuries drive your premium to a certain degree. So if things are going well, you're going to see a reduction, and your premium should come down accordingly. So I think from that perspective, that can
It's
help
a safe
drive.
answer in your headquarters. I like that. Yeah. Hey, everybody slide your mics up a little bit, would you? And then Corey, you get 30 seconds. Go ahead.
A lot of the clients that we work with, they require a certain EMR rate. And that is one of the things that's pushed us. So having a high safety record, performing on the job safe, gives us more opportunity to take on more projects. Obviously keeps our people safe, but it also is a marketing tool. We get to market, hey, this is how many man hours or resource hours we spent on a project, and here's how safe we've been, including how many miles we drive and at fault versus non at fault. So we track every single thing that could be there, and it is a sales tool to a lot of the clients that care about it.
Excellent. Donna, you get 22 seconds.
And then, how can I help you understand better? So the return on investment, the financial analysis, requires a deep dive by our individual finance officers for each of our business units. And then it requires significant input from our design engineers. And they will help us understand what the long-term, potential is this, how, what's the maintenance fees, et cetera. Yeah.
Bob?
So one size doesn't fit all, right? So modular construction may make a lot of sense for various companies. Other companies maybe not so much. So I would say that it's probably something to look at and use as another tool in our toolbox that can improve our safety records.
Yeah. I assume at some point we're going to find a tipping point too for a project of X dollars. It makes sense to do this, right? Listen, thank you very much. We've got questions coming. Don't leave yet. Again, slide your mics up so we can hear you better. And
thank you very much. Very interesting discussion. I have a question for Corey. So TJ mentioned that the way he met you is outside. He saw that they had a good practice of prevention through design even before people knowing about it, and that's how we connected. So do you have documented lessons learned or recommendations on how you were implementing that can be shared with other companies to help them put good practices with their workers, with all of the stakeholders involved?
We do. I think we could do a better job with the documentation and publication, but we do. In fact, it's one of our things that we do for growing. We go to certain areas. We like to grow, the trade in that area. So one of the things we do is we'll, I forget what you call it, the development of other smaller businesses. We'll bring them in, teach them the way, and we definitely apply those lessons learned. And they're easy to apply when you can show the benefit. So we absolutely do it. We have a big log of lessons learned.
other questions? Here we go.
I'll throw another one at Corey. So you guys, as a subcontractor, obviously you get to influence your own workforce and their safety, but I was just curious, because you come on later, how do you influence more the end user, or is there anything that the construction manager can do to assist you with that?
So we try to give input on that because we look at it from the service aspect too. So the biggest thing we can do when we come on is, because we are engineers as well, not just contractors, we try to talk the same language of the engineers to say, hey, this is what you're doing, but here's some modifications that are cost neutral, right? So no one's freaking out about the price. They're cost neutral. It's going to be an improvement to the project. It's going to be safer. And we also try to promote allowing us to be involved further upstream. So just like the graphs show, the further downstream we are of the process, the less effect or impact we have for the project. So we try to meet everyone where they're at. If their journey is about the finance, we try to meet them from the financial standpoint. If they're the engineering group, we've worked with Jacobs several times. If we work with the engineering group, we try to meet them at an engineering level, talk technical stuff. If we're meeting with the owner or the operations team, the maintenance team, we try to make sure we speak about that. And taking that approach makes us a little bit more versatile than saying, hey, this is the one way you have to do it. You have to meet people where they're at on their journey. That's the only way you can get there.
Yeah.
Other questions? I've got one if nobody else, no? Donna?
Oh, no.
So 12, 15 years this has been going. If you think ahead 10 years, clear your mind, you're in this beautiful place, and you're going to put up another Amazon warehouse somewhere. How is it going to, in 10 years, what's that going to look like if we're successful in what we've talked about today?
Certainly, it'll be quiet, that the warehouse would be no more than 77 decibels, which is now what our design standard is. That the, I can't really speak for the ergonomic hazards, but well, I'll speak for that. That are the way that we're loading and unloading the material handling equipment is assisted by lifting devices much more so than it is currently. And so we have much less ergonomic risks to our workforce. If there's any kind of chemicals that are used by our maintenance staff to maintain the equipment, that those chemicals are not hazardous to health, not hazardous by the skin route, and not hazardous by the inhaled route either. And the thermal comfort continues to be good. Our temperature, our internal temperatures are moderated to 77 degrees Fahrenheit, winter and summer, so that and cooler in the winter time, but in the summer we drop it down to 77. Continue to do that, but also look for opportunities to reduce the energy consumption associated with that. Work with our mechanical engineers, and we're looking at some DOAS systems right now to continue to improve the thermal comfort and improve airflow, and then also to make sure that we're meeting our energy controls, our goals, our energy management goals.
Yeah, I hope most people know that a couple years ago, they got a LEED pilot program for, you get LEED points if you put some PtD practices into your building. Do you have a question or you want me to hurry up?
Yes, I do have a question, Donna. It's for you. So to what extent the process that you explained today of getting, starting from the beginning and identifying what's going on and trying to eliminate the hazard and the equipment and the production process, to what extent is something that you're doing, or is something that the industry, other sectors are engaging as well with?
But it's really interesting. I'm trying to work with other large warehousing organizations and trying to understand how they're going to comply with the new ASHRAE standard, the ASHRAE 241, and this is the control of infectious aerosols. When you take a look at that, it's remarkable what it's going to be. Basically, you're supposed to be able to flip a switch on a building if there is local transmission rates of some kind of respirable disease, like maybe even measles, or a high incidence of influenza, or heaven help us, another COVID kind of increase in a specific area. And how do you do that? How is that going to be managed for an organization as large as Amazon? And so I'm trying to understand how to work with other large warehouse companies about how they're going to do that. How do you look at occupancy? What's the potential for transmission in a warehouse environment where you have one person with, well, not one person, but several hundred people with millions of cubic feet of volume? What does that mean, and how do we manage that? So in order to facilitate that, which is really fun, and that's love being part of the professional association, I've been working with ASHRAE, and I pulled them into a special task force that we have at AIHA now. ASHRAE's in it. I think OSHA, NIOSH is going to be part of that. A lot of other mechanical engineering groups are going to come in because they also recognize the need for indoor air quality and to design buildings in the future so we protect people from transmissible viruses. So that I think, to me, that's the path forward. You pull everybody together to do this. Not what I do. I know what we have to do, I have to bring, and I can be part of that team, but that's why I need those people there, and ASHRAE has agreed to come into this conversation.
Good. Real quick, can you explain
I'm
ASHRAE
sorry.
to the crowd?
Oh, the American Society of Refrigeration Heating Engineers. So ASHRAE, they develop mechanical standards, for how buildings are cooled, indoor air quality standard, 62.1 is an ASHRAE standard for indoor air quality. Yeah, you want to learn about ASHRAE. They're good.
Well, I'm glad this was taped. I thought this was thank you very much. This was just a great presentation. Thanks for participating.